Most welcome to Historiespanarna, History Reconnaissance. This is the Imperial Japanese Navy 1946, Defeat and Destruction. In 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy was the third most powerful navy in the world. In July 1945, almost all capital ships were sunk or sheltering in harbors. When the war ended in August, it had lost 334 warships and 300,000 officers and men. The images that follow are from 1946 and show the remains of this once mighty navy and its final dismantling and destruction. The heavy cruiser Aoba took part in the battles of Coral Sea, Sava Island and Cape Esperance. There she was hit multiple times by broadsides from American cruisers and was heavily damaged. Torpedoed in 1944, returning to Kure Harbor in Japan and declared irreparable, used as a floating anti-aircraft battery until finally attacked by US carrier aircraft and B-24 bombers. At the beginning of the war in the Pacific, Japan had 10 aircraft carriers, United States 7, 3 of them in the Pacific, and Great Britain 8, 1 in the Indian Ocean. After the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway, the balance shifted and shocked Japanese naval planners. It was not until late 1942 that the Japanese carrier program was in high gear. Many carriers were planned to be completed between 1944 and 1948. Only a few of these were commissioned, and too late to be of any use. In 1946, the Japanese Navy carriers were either resting at the bottom of the oceans or waiting to be scrapped, like the Onryo class carrier Amagi in these pictures. The light aircraft carrier Ryuho was one of many conversions. A submarine tender turned into a carrier, and one of the least successful ones with slow speed and weak construction. Here, Japanese laborers are peeling off the wooden flight deck for salvage. The battleships Ise and Hyuga, completed 1917 and 1918, was considered obsolete already in the beginning of the war in the Pacific. They became part of the conversion program following the Battle of Midway and turned into hybrid carriers. 2 turrets aft were removed and replaced by a hangar, flight deck and 2 catapults. A rail system connecting to each catapult and a T-shaped lift connecting the hangar to the flight deck. The air groups should be a dozen dive bombers on each ship, launched by catapult, then having to land on a conventional carrier or on a land base. Only the ship's reconnaissance seaplane could return and be hoisted back on board. The attacks on Kure and the inland sea in July 1945 sank most of the surviving large ships of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Allied losses were higher than in many operations due to the heavy anti-aircraft defenses around Kure. Remaining in the home islands were lesser naval vessels, transports and merchant marine. The task left was the Japanese submarines to be demolished, scuttled or otherwise destroyed. 49 submarines had surrendered afloat, mostly to the US forces in Japan. Much of this destruction was done in Operation Road's End and Dead Duck. Some of this is shown in the newsreel that follows.
At Sasebo Naval Base in Japan, the undersea boats of Japan's once mighty navy are lined up for their last voyage. Among the submarines is the I-58, which sank the United States cruiser Indianapolis just a few days before Japan surrendered.
In July 1945, the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis had delivered parts of Little Boy, the first nuclear weapon used in combat, to the United States Air Force on the island of Tinian. On July 30th, the ship was torpedoed by the I-58 and sank in 12 minutes. Of the 1,195 crewmen aboard, only 316 survived. The greatest single loss of life at sea from a single ship in the history of the US Navy.
The 24 submarines, unfit for salvage, are loaded with charges of high explosives. The largest one of this group had deck hangar space and catapult for 4 airplanes, but the surrender came before they could be used. From Sasebo, the submarines head for the open sea and the end of the road. 60 miles off the Japanese coast, the cruiser Chicago and other United States naval craft stand by to blast the doomed ships. In deep water, Japan's former terror raiders are sunk beyond all hope of reclaim.
This map shows the status of the Japanese Navy on September 1st, 1945, and the enormous destruction inflicted by American air attacks. Figures in parentheses shows damaged and sunken ships, battleships, aircraft carriers and cruisers. It was a daunting task to bring all these troops back to Japan. In addition, there were 3 million civilian Japanese to repatriate from British, Chinese and Soviet-held territories. At the end of the war, Japan was acutely short of large passenger ships. Only 2 hospital ships had survived the hostilities. To bridge the gap until Japanese vessels could be used, 100 US Liberty ships and 86 LSTs were made available.
That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.